All right, it is time to kick off day two. I know a couple of us already talked. What I'm going to do, we're going to go through all this and then we are going to stop the recording and then we'll talk like on the non-recorded side about kind of the assessments and things like that. So we're going to get into it. Today is all about Band-Aids, root causes, and then, like I said, we'll go into the assessment. Before I forget, next session is tomorrow, 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, which all of that is 4 p.m. Pacific Time. And we're going to get into the nuts and bolts of how to train with pain. So, without further ado, let's get into it. If you have questions, stop me. Do like the raised hand thing on here. Other than that, we're going to get into it. So, band aids, root causes, what the heck? Why are we even talking about this? For me, I see too many people who they look to band-aids for pain relief, for getting better, all that stuff. Okay. So, what are band-aids? For me, they're just temporary solutions. They help mask the pain, they help kind of reduce the overall level of pain, but they don't actually address anything. They don't actually fix why you're having pain. They just kind of mask like the low level symptoms, right? So what are these band-aids? Using hot and cold, right? If you have like muscle spasms and you're using heat, if you have some joint pain and you're using cold, massage guns, foam rollers, massage, chiropractors, even physical therapists can be band-aids. Scraping, dry needling, cupping, lacrosse balls. I'm not saying that we don't ever use these, but the important thing is to know when to use them and where to use them, right? So we'll get into this in just a little bit, like with the root cause. But for me, so many people are like, well, I have shoulder pain, so I'm just gonna dry needle it, I'm gonna scrape it, gonna do whatever. But unless your shoulder pain is coming from the exact area that's having pain, and that is the root cause, then it's really just masking it, right? It's just trying to put a band-aid on something when the problem is somewhere else. And that's what I see a lot of the times, especially with lifters, people who are active, gym goers, whatever you want to like classify yourself as. That's what I see is that, hey, my knee might hurt, but it's not coming from my knee. It's because of my hip or something like that. And like I said, we can get into more of that here in just a second, but it's very important. And this is like one of my biggest frustrations is seeing people just use like foam rollers and things like that without actually knowing if that's actually doing anything to fix the issue, right? Um, I in like with my clients, so when you work with me, we might use lacrosse balls, we might use a massage therapist. I don't really use dry needling, don't really use foam rollers all that often unless we just need to get that pain down. Foam rollers, what they do is you have like signals going from your brain to your body part. And basically, what the foam rollers, cupping, scraping, all of that, a lot of times, or TENS units, a lot of times what that does is it just breaks up the signal going back to your brain saying there's pain. Chiropractors can do the same thing. Um, so yeah, we use them occasionally, not that often, because we actually want to do mobility and stability and strengthening and things like that to actually fix the problem and not just like continue to mask or band-aid or anything like that. Okay. Which leads us into the root cause. So for me, the root cause is more than just like the surface level pain, right? And kind of like what I alluded to earlier. I can't even tell you how many times I've seen people with back pain or knee pain, and it's actually coming from their hip, right? Their hip's not moving the way they want it to or that it should. And so when they're doing something like a deadlift, they're using their back more than they are their hips just because their hips don't move the way they should. Same with knee pain, right? If you're doing squats and you don't have enough knee or hip motion, that motion is going to come from somewhere. And a lot of times that knee is getting sandwiched. Ankles. If someone has super tight ankles, a lot of times it's going to cause knee pain. The problem is not at the knee. it is at the hip or the ankle or wherever. So that's where doing like a really thorough assessment is very important, because that's going to help us identify the root cause so that we can attack that. And then we can actually stop doing all the bullshit band-aids, and we can actually fix the issue so that the issues, stay away. I see too many people who go through this roller coaster of like pain, they rest, they don't do anything, they avoid pissing the area off, and they didn't actually fix anything. They're just not pissing it off. And so, again, the root cause, that is why my clients have such great success, is because we are hyper focused on finding the root cause so that they don't have pain that comes back, so that we can attack it, so that in 2 months, 3 months, a year, 2 years, that pain's not coming back, right? So we're actually fixing the problem instead of just throwing a band-aid on, downstream from where the problem actually is. So it is super important to remember that the body is a chain, right? And so if you move one chain length, or one chain length is stuck or immobile, that motion for that chain is going to come from somewhere else, right? Whether it's above or below where the stuck part is. And so it is, I can't even stress this enough. It is so, so important that we continue to search for the root cause. Okay. A couple examples of this. This is going to be a much shorter session, by the way. So just bear with me on that. And then we'll get into the assessments. But a couple of examples that I wanted to highlight. I had a client, her name's Lauren. She was a huge like CrossFit competitor, Olympic weightlifter. And she was having like severe forearm pain when she would go up overhead, which is super important for Olympic weightlifting, right? She tried PT for a few months and it didn't really do anything. Helped a little bit maybe, but overall she was still having the problem. She was still having the pain. She felt like she was getting weaker because she couldn't lift heavy overhead. So she had had pain for months, interfering with lifting, interfering with day to day. Her forearm was just killing her. So we got on a call. We'd actually met at a Olympic weightlifting competition down in Arkansas. And we had met, we had talked after she had already seen this other PT. And I was like, I just don't feel like that's a forearm issue. All the questions I was asking, everything like that, it didn't sound like a true forearm issue. And so we got set up with an assessment. We, wanted to see kind of what was going on. Because I told her on the call, I was like, Lauren, it sounds like this is coming from your neck, or like you're like in your shoulder. It's the first rib. So the first rib actually kicks up right here. So if it's elevated, it pushes out on nerves. And so I was like, I think what's going on is like you're going up overhead, things are getting pinched off, and then you just feel like you lose all strength. Your forearm starts to hurt, things like that. So I told her that on the call. We hopped into an assessment. We found out immediately that that's what it was. So she was in PT for months, right? Prior to us hopping on a call. Literally within 3 days, her symptoms reduced by 75%. Like, that's not even joking. We spent the next couple weeks just trying to build the forearm strength back, the overhead strength back, continuing to reduce symptoms, depending on where she was at in her menstrual cycle, depending on like if she had alcohol, things like that, which we talked about in session 1. We would have a little bit of flare up in symptoms. So to me, that told me there's still some irritation. So we continue to work, we continue to do the things, and literally like she started hitting PRs like I think 6 weeks after working with me, because she hadn't lost a lot of strength. She just lost a lot of the ability to tap into that because of the pain. And so she just freaking crushed it. And so again, like that's a classic example of why I don't just treat the area that's causing pain. We actually look to see if there's something deeper or further along like going on. And honestly, I think this is again like a classic example of why so many people fail PT, or why PT fails them is because whether it's insurance standards, whether it's doctor, whether it's physical therapist or chiropractor, whoever, they're only looking at where the symptoms actually are. They're not digging for why they're occurring or what might be causing them above or below the problem area. So again, that was a super interesting case that we were able to figure out like very quickly. And it kind of made her mad because she had spent so much time and money going to an in-person PT. But anyway, another example is my guy Larry. He's another CrossFitter. Just so happens that, a couple of examples I want to share were CrossFitters, but he also did powerlifting, and he would have back pain with a deadlift. And he was fine up to about 500 pounds. Anything over that, he started having pain. So, he came to me and he's like, I really want to do this powerlifting comp, but once I get to 500, like I'm hurting. Okay. And 500, for whoever is on here, whoever's watching the replay, this could be the same thing if you're having pain with 100 pounds, 200 pounds, 800 pounds, whatever. If you're having pain at a certain number, it's like we can look at what all's going on and help. We'll dive more into this in the next session, but you can still train if you have pain at 500 pounds, but not at 480. That's really not that far off, and you can still train, right? You can still get strong. Again, I'm getting a little ahead of myself because that's in session 3, but yeah. So with Larry, what we did was we did an assessment. And again, like I said, a lot of times people who have back pain, it's coming from their hips. So we did a low back assessment because I always want to check where the pain's actually at. And then we also did a hip assessment. And so what I found was that his hip flexion, so how much he could basically bring his knee to his chest, was limited, as well as internal rotation. So hip internal rotation is actually very important when it comes to squatting, or also like the bottom part of your deadlift. And so, we tried a couple things. He actually had enough equipment at home that we could trial a couple things while we were doing the assessment. And so we did the movement assessment. I watched his deadlift. I had him work up. And when he got close to 500, things really just started becoming apparent. So I noticed, his hips already started off very high, okay, with his deadlift, even at 135. So his hips were high, and then his form broke down a little bit, which I'm not huge on being like, your form is your problem, because a lot of times it's not. It's a multifactorial problem as to why you're having pain. And so we actually, we were trying a couple things. I asked if he could bring his hips down. He couldn't. So we did banded hip mobility, which is like one of my favorite mobility drills for hip pain, back pain, lack of hip mobility, etc., knee pain. And so I had him do it within the same freaking session as our assessment. He was able to pull 500 from the floor without pain. So what we did was it wasn't a problem with his back. That's just where the symptoms were popping up. What was actually going on was he didn't have the hip motion so that he could use his glutes coming off the floor with a deadlift. And he was just basically lifting that 500 pounds with his back. Once we got those hips involved, once we got the glutes going, then he was able to lift no problem. So again, it's a classic example of like the back wasn't the problem. The back was being overloaded because it was doing all of the work, but it was actually coming from the hips. Now, if I treated him with, a typical low back protocol that you see in some bullshit clinic or McGill or something like that, one, it wouldn't have helped him deadlift. Two, it wouldn't have actually gotten to the root cause, and he probably would have had problems once he got to like 520, even 515, 530, or whatever. He probably would have had problems. And so we got to the root of the problem. He was able to lift. He was able to progress. A few months later, I talked to him and he was pulling, I don't even remember what he's pulling, but he was pulling significantly over the 500 pounds because he didn't have back pain. So, anyway, again, short and sweet tonight. Just kind of wanted to go into all of those things, go into a couple of examples, and then make sure we have time to go into your assessments. So, again, next session is going to be tomorrow, Friday. It's going to be 6 p.m. Central Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And then we're going to be talking about how to train with pain, strategies that I use, my 4-step process to train clients coming out of back pain, shoulder pain, knee pain, hip pain, whatever. My 4-step process for that, and then some strategies, like I said, so that you can continue to train with pain. So I'm going to stop this recording unless anybody has questions. Okay. So I'm going to stop this recording. We're going to go into assessments now, and then, yeah, anyway. All right. If any questions do pop up for those watching the recording, let me know. Just shoot me a message in the group chat, and then we'll get to them. All right.